I tucked the soft blanket around my daughter Sophie as she stirred slightly in her crib. Her tiny hand opened and closed before she settled back into sleep. For a moment, the world felt quiet and safe. That feeling didn't come often these days, but whenever I looked at her, I felt calm again. Like I had something worth holding on to. Sophie had just turned 1, and I still couldn't believe how small she was or how much she had changed my life. When I first found out I was pregnant, I didn't really think about what it meant to raise a child. I thought about little shoes, baby giggles, bedtime stories. I thought about love. What I didn't think about was the weight that would land on my shoulders. Back then, I wasn't worried. I had Jason. He had convinced me that we were ready, more than ready, to have a baby. I can still hear his voice. Kids are the best motivator, Olivia. Once we have one, I'll step up. We'll do this together. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. He was the one who wanted to start a family sooner rather than later. Me, I thought maybe we should wait. Maybe get a better apartment, save some money, let me get my footing as a teacher first. But Jason brushed all that off with a laugh and an arm around my waist. Plenty of families start small. We'll make it work. Trust me, Liv. This is the perfect time. And I did trust him. I trusted him with everything. Now, looking back, I see how much I wanted a real family because of how I grew up. My mom died the day I was born. My dad eventually remarried. His new wife, Margaret, tried at first, but once she had kids of her own, her focus shifted to them. I became the extra. The one told to watch the kids, clean up, and stay out of the way when she needed space. My dad didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. Either way, I learned what it felt like to be unwanted in your own home. Maybe that's why Jason's words meant so much to me. He made me feel like I mattered. I wanted to build a home where I was at the center of someone's love. Where my child would feel safe and seen, not pushed aside. As I stood there that night, watching Sophie breathe quietly, I thought about how naive I had been. How fast dreams could fall apart. But I also thought about how strong I had become since they did. Sophie didn't know any of it. She just knew I was there, and I was her mom. That had to be enough for now. Growing up, I never really had a normal family. My first memories are of my dad leaving for work and me sitting at the kitchen table, watching the clock, waiting for someone to come home. My mom wasn't there. She never was. She died the day I was born. All I had of her were a few old photos and the smell of her perfume on one of her scarves. My dad tried, but he was clearly struggling. Then came Margaret. At first, she was kind. She brushed my hair, bought me dresses, took me to the park. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally have a mom. But everything changed when she had her own kids. First a little sister, then a baby brother. I wanted to be happy. I tried. But everything shifted. I went from being part of the family to being the one who helped with everything. Margaret focused on her children. My dad was too tired to notice anything. I picked up toys, washed dishes, and took my siblings out, not because I was asked, but because I knew no one else would. What I wanted wasn't much. Just someone to see me. I wanted hugs that weren't rushed. Words that weren't thrown out like an afterthought. But most days, I felt like I didn't exist. Like I was just part of the background. So I started dreaming about leaving. By the time I was 16, I knew I wouldn't stay in that house a day longer than I had to. I buried myself in schoolwork, got part-time jobs, and planned a future where I wouldn't feel like a burden anymore. That's probably why Jason's attention felt so powerful when I met him. He made me feel chosen. He said, "You're all I need, Liv. We'll have our own place, our own life, our own family." And I believed him. Looking back now, I see that I was still carrying that little girl inside me. The one who just wanted a home filled with love. I thought Jason was the answer. I thought loving him and building a life with him would fix everything that hurt. I didn't realize how wrong I was. How risky it is to give your whole heart to someone without knowing if they're strong enough to hold it. When I turned 18, I packed 2 suitcases and left. I had a scholarship to a teaching program and a promise to myself that I'd never be the extra piece in someone else's life again. Sarasota, Florida became my safe place. Far enough to breathe, close enough that I could go back if I had to. But I didn't want to. College was hard, but I loved it. For the first time, people saw me for who I was, not as the stepkid. I worked evenings at a bookstore, studied late in the library, and told myself I was building the future I had always dreamed about. A teaching degree. A job helping little kids. A home filled with love. When I graduated, reality hit fast. Teaching jobs were hard to find. No one wanted to hire someone straight out of school. Bills were piling up, so I took a job at an outdoor clothing store in a strip mall. It wasn't what I wanted, but it paid for a small apartment I could call mine. I was struggling with a huge box of winter jackets that needed to go to the back storage room. I could barely lift it when I heard a voice behind me. "Whoa, you planning to carry that yourself?" I turned around and saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, messy brown hair, and a smile that made it feel like I'd known him forever. Before I could say anything, he picked up the box like it weighed nothing and carried it to the back. "Thanks," I said, brushing hair from my face. I probably looked a mess. "No problem," he said with a grin. "I'm Jason. Vac tech by day, hero by night." I laughed even though I hadn't meant to. There was something warm about him, something familiar in the way he talked. He started coming by more often. Sometimes to buy something small, sometimes just to say hi. Soon, we were grabbing coffee after my shifts. He'd tell me about his dreams, starting his own business, building a home, having kids. "You deserve more than working yourself to death in a place like this," he said one night, gently brushing his thumb over my knuckles. "You deserve someone who'll take care of you. Someone like me." For a girl who'd spent her whole life feeling invisible, his words were powerful. Jason made me feel seen, chosen, even loved. In a few months, we were inseparable. He moved into my apartment, just for a while, he said. But soon, his toothbrush and spare clothes turned into a whole dresser. At the time, it felt like everything was falling into place. I had a man who said he wanted a family, just like I did. I believed we were building one together. But I didn't know how fast that dream could fall apart. Jason proposed on a rainy Thursday. It was out of nowhere. He'd had another fight with his mom that day, something about growing up and being responsible. He came storming into the apartment, dropped his keys on the counter and said, "Let's get married. Right now. Let's show everyone we're serious." It wasn't the romantic proposal I dreamed of as a girl. But I didn't care. Jason said he wanted me, and that was enough. We skipped the big wedding. Just a courthouse ceremony, a cheap dinner, and a few selfies we texted to friends. I didn't mind. The marriage itself felt like the celebration. What I wanted was a home. A family. Someone who looked at me and saw a future. Then I met Margaret. Jason had warned me. She's particular. She likes things done her way. Don't take it personally. I tried not to, but from the moment I met her, it felt like I was standing in front of a judge. Not a future mother-in-law. She was polite but distant. It was like she was sizing me up and didn't like what she saw. Margaret had spent years as a hospital administrator, and it showed. She walked like she ran a board meeting. Her voice was clipped and sharp. "Olivia, is it?" she asked when Jason introduced me. She looked over my thrift store dress and worn-out shoes. "And what exactly do you do?" "I'm looking for a teaching job," I said. "In the meantime, I work retail." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Teaching. H.M. Noble, I suppose." Jason tried to joke, wrapping an arm around me, but the room felt heavy with tension. I told myself it didn't matter. Margaret didn't need to love me. Just respect that I was Jason's wife. For a while, things were okay. She stayed in her lane, I stayed in mine. Jason always said, "She'll come around. She just needs time." I wanted to believe him. So I kept trying, sending holiday cards, inviting her to dinner, making small talk. But I always left feeling like I didn't belong. Still, I believed love could fix everything. Jason said he wanted kids. I thought maybe, once we had a baby, Margaret would soften. Maybe she'd see me as family. But I didn't realize I was setting myself up for heartbreak. I kept thinking that if I gave enough, smiled enough, tried hard enough, it would all work out. But life isn't like that. And marriage definitely isn't. It happened faster than I expected. One morning, I sat on the bathroom floor, holding a pregnancy test in my shaky hands. 2 pink lines stared back at me. I was pregnant. I didn't move for almost an hour. I wasn't sure how I felt. Excited? Scared? Probably both. Jason had always said that becoming a dad would make him grow up. That it would push him to be better. So when I told him, I expected something big, hugs, tears, a spin around the room. Instead, he just blinked, then gave a nervous smile. Wow! Okay, that's sooner than I thought. But hey, that's great. We'll make it work. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe it was the start of something beautiful. But the cracks started right away. I had terrible morning sickness that lasted all day. Working on my feet in retail became impossible. My doctor warned me about stress and lifting. So, I quit my job. I thought we'd adjust. But without my income, money got tight fast. Jason said he'd pick up more shifts. Instead, he started going out more. I need to blow off steam, he said. That meant late nights at bars and weekends where I barely saw him. I remember standing in front of the mirror one night, resting my hand on the small bump just starting to show. Man, Liv, you're really starting to show. Better slow down on the snacks, huh? Then he laughed like it was just a joke. I laughed, too, but later in bed, I cried quietly so he wouldn't hear me. Margaret, surprisingly, called more often. She asked about doctor's appointments and even dropped off a few bags of groceries. It was strange. Her voice had lost some of that edge whenever she talked about her grandbaby. But Jason, he just seemed distant, like fatherhood was some vague idea he could think about later. By the time I reached my 3rd trimester, I had stopped expecting Jason to hold my hair back when I was sick or rub my aching feet. I learned to manage on my own, telling myself things would change once the baby arrived. He'd see her tiny face and something would click. He'd finally grow up just like he promised. I was wrong, so painfully wrong. The day Sophie was born was both the most beautiful and the loneliest day of my life. Labor came early, 2 weeks before my due date, and Jason was nowhere to be found. He had told me he'd be home by 8, but midnight came and went, and still no sign of him. I called 3 times before he finally picked up, his voice slurred and irritated. What? Liv? I'm out with the guys. Can this wait? No, Jason, it can't. My water just broke. He stumbled into the hospital an hour later, reeking of alcohol and cheap cologne. I was too exhausted to fight, too focused on getting through the contractions. And when Sophie's tiny cry filled the room, all of it faded for a moment. I held her close, her soft skin warm against my chest, and whispered, I've got you. I promise. You'll never feel unwanted. Not like I did. Jason smiled for the pictures and even posted one on social media. Proud dad, bless life. But that night when I asked him to hold Sophie so I could sleep, he muttered something about being too tired and collapsed in the chair, snoring within minutes. Things didn't get better when we came home. Sophie cried a lot, colic, the pediatrician said, and I was up every 2 hours rocking her while Jason slept in the other room with the door closed. He said he needed his rest for work. The weight of motherhood was heavy. But it wasn't just the sleepless nights. It was the emotional emptiness. I'd look at Jason and see a man who had begged me to start a family only to vanish when reality hit. He'd disappear for long stretches, claiming overtime, but his stories didn't add up. Too many nights out, too many excuses. One evening, I called him, hoping he'd pick up diapers on his way home. A woman's voice answered his phone. She laughed softly before saying, "Hello." My stomach dropped. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. There was silence. Then the line went dead. Jason came home hours later, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. He didn't even bother lying. "Her name's Bianca," he said flatly. "She understands me, Liv. I think I love her." I stood there, clutching Sophie to my chest, unable to process what I was hearing. He wasn't even apologetic. He was free. The next day, Jason packed a bag and left. No fight, no begging, just a quick "You'll be fine. You're strong." And just like that, I was alone with a newborn, an empty bank account, and a heart that felt shattered beyond repair. For a while, I thought I wouldn't make it. But in those dark moments, holding Sophie close, I whispered to her again and again, "I'm not going to let this break me. I promise." I didn't expect to see Margaret standing at my door 2 weeks after Jason left. We hadn't spoken much since Sophie was born, beyond the occasional polite phone call. She looked different that day, tired, thinner, like she'd been carrying something heavy of her own. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, holding a paper bag of groceries in one hand. I hesitated, unsure if this was going to be another lecture about fixing things with her son, but I stepped aside. She set the groceries on the counter, glanced at Sophie sleeping in her bassinet, and sighed. "You don't have to say anything," she said before I could speak. "I know what Jason did." Her eyes were glossy, but not with anger. There was shame there. I told myself I raised him better than this, but I guess I didn't. "And now you're paying the price." I didn't know how to respond. Margaret and I had never been close. I'd always felt like an outsider around her, like she was quietly judging me. Yet here she was, apologizing for her own son. "You and Sophie don't deserve this," she continued. "So if you want, you can come stay with me, at least until you figure things out." For a moment, I almost said no. Pride has a way of convincing you that suffering alone is better than accepting help. But then I looked at Sophie, tiny, vulnerable, depending on me for everything, and I swallowed my pride. "Thank you," I whispered. Living with Margaret was strange at first. She had rules, routines, a structured way of running her home that felt rigid to me. But then I saw the small things. How she'd rock Sophie when my arms were too tired. How she'd make dinner and leave a plate out for me when I was late, putting Sophie to sleep. Slowly, the walls between us began to fall. One night, Margaret shared something I hadn't expected. Her own story. Years ago, her husband had left her when Jason was just a toddler. "I know what it's like," she admitted quietly, "to hold her child and wonder how you're going to keep going. That's why I can't just watch you struggle." For the first time, I didn't see her as Jason's mother, but as a woman who had survived her own heartbreak. Her support didn't fix everything. Jason was still gone. The bills were still piling up, but it gave me breathing room. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Sophie and I wouldn't have to do this alone after all. Even with Margaret's help, I knew I couldn't stay under her roof forever. She never made me feel unwelcome, but there was a look in her eyes, soft, almost maternal, that reminded me she wanted me to find my own footing. I wanted that, too. So, I started searching for work that would let me take care of Sophie while still paying the bills. Teaching jobs were scarce, and I couldn't afford daycare on a starting salary. One night, while scrolling through online listings, I found an ad looking for a patient, reliable nanny for a 4-year-old boy. Flexible hours, good pay. The job was for a boy named Ethan, whose mother had passed away 2 years earlier. His father, Daniel Carter, owned a chain of car dealerships in Sarasota. According to the ad, Ethan had struggled socially since losing his mom, rarely speaking to anyone outside his family. I hesitated at first. Taking Sophie with me to work wasn't exactly professional. But when I called the number, an older woman named Helen, the family's housekeeper, answered with warmth in her voice. "Bring her along," she said. "Mr. Carter is fine with that. He just wants someone who will be kind to Ethan." The next day, I drove to their home, an elegant Mediterranean-style house tucked behind a line of palm trees. Ethan was curled up on the couch, clutching a small stuffed elephant. He glanced at me and Sophie, then buried his face in the toy. Helen gave me an encouraging nod. "He takes time," she whispered. I knelt down a few feet from him, letting Sophie wiggle on my lap. "Hi, Ethan," I said softly. "This is Sophie. She likes elephants, too." Sophie, as if on cue, reached for the stuffed toy, giggling. Ethan peeked out from behind it, and for the first time I saw the corners of his mouth twitch upward, just a tiny, hesitant smile. Daniel walked in soon after. I had expected someone older, maybe stern and intimidating, but he wasn't like that at all. Tall, lean, and dressed in a simple polo and jeans, he looked more like someone you'd see coaching Little League than running a business empire. "You must be Olivia," he said, offering a hand. His voice was warm, but tired, the kind of tired that comes from holding a family together on your own. "Thank you for coming." We talked about schedules, expectations, and his hopes for Ethan. "He's a great kid," Daniel said, glancing toward his son. "But he hasn't opened up to anyone since. Well, since it happened. I just want him to laugh again."